This is the Italian Citizenship Podcast, hosted by Marco Permunian and Rafael Di Furia. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Italian Citizenship Podcast, presented by ItaliancitizenshipAssistance.com. I am here today with Italian attorney Marco Permunian, who is also the head of the U.S. office of ItaliancitizenshipAssistance.com, and I am Rafael Di Furia. Hey there, Marco. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you. I'm doing well. I gotta say again that after not recording together for such a long time, that to be in the same place again is quite a treat. But anyway, moving on. Today we wanted to talk a little bit about the situation that Marco and I both hear a lot about. In his practice, he gets a lot of questions from people who are getting their Italian citizenship about what will happen to their spouse if they want to move to Italy or the European Union and to be able to actually stay together. What is the situation in that case? How do they get a visa? And so on. This is something that I also, on my personal YouTube channel, get a lot of questions about from people who are considering getting their Italian citizenship, or people who already are Italian citizens and want to figure out how they can be together. But anyway, Marco, let's start out first with the situation that a person has already received their Italian citizenship. So the Italian spouse wants to bring their non-Italian spouse to live with them in Italy or the European Union. What would be the first steps that they would need to accomplish? For example, maybe let's start out with what documents would even be needed for them.
So being an Italian citizen allows you to reside anywhere in the European Union. And it goes without saying that your spouse can go with you if you're married. But there are some limitations. So upon arrival in Italy, so there is nothing the non-Italian spouse has to do prior to going to Italy or the European Union where the couple is relocating. The non-Italian spouse can simply travel to Italy or the other European country that the couple has chosen. And by law, that person can stay for 3 months without a visa. But what happens if you are wanting to stay for longer than 3 months? In that case, you have to apply for a residency permit, which is basically a permission of stay that every European country makes available to the spouse of an EU citizen. To apply for this residency permit, you need basically just documentation to prove that you are married to your Italian spouse, so your marriage certificate from Italy, so not the foreign marriage certificate, but rather the Italian marriage certificate. As our audience knows, even if you got married abroad, because one of you is an Italian citizen, your marriage certificate has been registered in Italy. So that's the document that you need. The marriage certificate issued by the Italian municipality where the Italian spouse is registered with the AIRE. Other than that, you only need your passport, so the Italian passport and the American passport, and that's basically it. So it's a very simple process because the law in any European country basically protects the right for a couple to be together. So that's why it is a simple process for the non-Italian spouse to apply for this residency permit. It is also necessary to have pictures, like when you apply for a passport, and you have to pay a 16 euros tax for the application. Also, it is important that the information on these documents that we just listed matches. So it is very important that your name and last name, as it is on your passport, matches with your name and last name and date of birth on your marriage certificate, because basically the government has to be sure of two things: that you are married to an Italian and of who you are. So this information needs to be accurate on both of these key documents, the Italian marriage record and your American passport. So if there is a discrepancy, make sure that you fix the issue before you relocate to Italy with the purpose of staying with your spouse.
So say, for example, maybe if there was a woman, her last name, because of her ex-husband, stayed as Johnson. So we'll call her Mary Johnson. But then she marries an Italian guy with the last name Rossi. And then on her American passport, now her name should be Mary Rossi, but in fact, it would be Mary Johnson. In that case, you're saying she would need to make sure that Mary Rossi is actually her name on all of her documentation.
Yes. So in that case, that person would have a problem with the application process. So it is better to fix issues like this before you travel to the European Union.
Just a little side question that may unfortunately add a little extra confusion, unnecessary confusion, but that I know some people will be concerned about, is that in Italy, when a woman gets married, her last name doesn't change, whereas generally in the United States, many people choose to change their last name. Many women choose to take their husband's last name. What would happen in that case when they want to come here to Italy? Will the Italian government recognize the woman who's changed her name with her new married Italian name, or will they have a problem with that last name?
The thing is, when you get married abroad, if the foreign country allows you to legally change names, so take the husband's last name, that's something that gets recognized in Italy. So if you get married in Italy, it's not possible to do it. But if you get married abroad, because the law of the foreign country allows you to take the husband's last name, that's not a problem for the Italian government as long as that was done legally abroad and the law of the foreign state allows you to do that.
And one other question. When a couple moves here, they decide to move from, say, the United States, for example, with one spouse being an Italian citizen and the other being a foreign citizen or non-EU citizen, can they immediately just go and apply? How does that work, and where would they have to go? What offices would even take care of this issue once they get here to Italy?
That's, by the way, one of the advantages of applying for a residency permit for your spouse rather than having your spouse apply for citizenship through marriage. Maybe we can talk about that in a second, but applying for citizenship through marriage is a more complex process, whereas applying for the residency permit for your spouse is a much more simple process, which means that you can apply right away. So you don't have to wait in order for your spouse to be able to apply for the residency permit. Instead, if you want your spouse to apply for citizenship through marriage, you have to wait 3 years from the marriage, or 2 years, depending on where you live, or 1.5 years if you have children, or 1 year if you have children and you live in Italy. So you have to wait. Instead, when applying for the residency permit, you can apply right away. So a lot of people, a lot of my clients, they are wanting to move to the European Union as soon as they become Italian citizens by descent. And the good thing about applying for the residency permit for your spouse rather than citizenship is that you can move to the European Union right away. As soon as you become an Italian citizen by descent, as soon as you have your Italian passport, you can just go to Europe and just stay there with your spouse. Once the couple arrives in Italy, the first step is to register for the Italian spouse to register as a resident in an Italian municipality. Of course, we're going to be talking for now, I believe it's easier to understand, about a relocation to Italy. We can talk in a second about a potential relocation to another European country, but let's start with a relocation to Italy. So when the couple relocates to Italy upon arrival, the Italian spouse must register as a resident. So with the population of the people who reside in a specific town. So there is a process that the Italian spouse has to go through, which will take about a month and a half. So it's very important to get started with this as soon as you arrive, because your non-Italian spouse only has 3 months available. So it's important to get started right away, because your non-Italian spouse can only stay on a tourist visa for only 3 months. So after the Italian spouse has become officially a resident of an Italian municipality, at that point, the non-Italian spouse can start the application process, which will not take very long. It's a very easy and quick process. As we said before, you only need a few documents, and the result will be a residency permit. Once they have applied for the permesso di soggiorno, it will allow them to stay in Italy for up to 5 years. Of course, there are certain requirements, which means that the stay of the non-Italian spouse is connected to the Italian spouse being a resident of Italy and to the couple being married, which means that if the couple gets divorced, or if the couple, or if the Italian spouse passes, or if the Italian spouse no longer wants to reside in Italy, in those cases, the non-Italian spouse loses the ability to reside in Italy if that happens in the first 5 years.
What would happen after that first 5 years? What would you be able to renew your permesso, or how would that even go?
After 5 years, the Italian government allows you to apply for a different kind of residency permit, which is no longer connected to your spouse being a resident of Italy and to you being married to your spouse. So it just gives you the government gives you the ability to continue residing in Italy, even if you get divorced, even if your spouse passes away, even if your spouse leaves Italy, you can continue residing in Italy on this new residency permit, but that can be done only after your first 5 years in Italy.
What about in the situation where you have a married couple that wants to move to another European Union country where one of the spouses is an Italian citizen and one of the spouses is a non-EU national?
In most cases, it would be almost as easy as the process that we just talked about for relocation to Italy. So all of the European countries allow the non-Italian spouse to reside in their country as long as the Italian spouse is a resident of that country. So the requirement, once again, is that the Italian spouse is formally a resident of the other European country. But then the documents required and the procedures that are applied can be slightly different depending on which country we're talking about. But if you are an Italian citizen who wants to live in another European country different from Italy, your spouse can just live with you. And the process that the non-Italian spouse has to go through is normally fairly easy.
But for example, say the couple are residing in Italy and the non-European national spouse would like to go to somewhere else in Europe and spend some time there studying or just on an extended vacation, a sabbatical of sorts. What would be the situation in that case?
The non-Italian spouse is allowed to travel within the European Union in the other EU countries different from Italy as a tourist just for 3 months at a time, which means that the time limit that the non-Italian national can spend in the European Union outside of the country where the couple resides is only 3 months. So what you're saying is not really possible, meaning if the non-Italian spouse by themselves want to go for an extended vacation longer than 3 months in another European country, that's not really possible. The only way for the non-Italian spouse to stay in another EU country for longer than 3 months is only if the Italian spouse actually goes with them, but the Italian spouse needs to become a resident of that country and the non-Italian spouse needs to apply for a residency permit for that specific country.
But now to move on to a very different subject. Until now, we've spoken about the situation, just to clarify for those that are listening, that we've spoken about a couple where one of the spouses is already recognized as an Italian citizen, whether it's originally that they grew up in Italy and relocated somewhere else, or they went through the process of Jure Sanguinis to make sure that they had their citizenship recognized as an adult. But now, what about the situation for, say, a couple where one spouse is about to apply for Italian citizenship or apply for, make a petition for recognition of Italian citizenship through Jure Sanguinis, and they would also like to make this petition here in Italy? How would they be able to bring their spouse with them for the duration of the process? Because I know there are a lot of people who after the lockdowns and the travel bans are over, would like to be able to relocate with their spouse to Italy to be able to go through this process.
The Italian government gives the ability to reside in Italy during the dual citizenship process only to the person who actually is applying for Italian citizenship by descent. As for the non-Italian spouse, in that case, the situation changes depending on where the person who's applying for citizenship is applying for citizenship by descent. Of course, the non-Italian spouse is allowed to stay with their spouse for the first 3 months, because for 3 months, anybody or almost everybody can stay in the European Union without a visa. So if we're talking about an American citizen, there will be no need for that person to have a visa to stay for up to 3 months.
And just to be able to come with just a regular tourist visa, you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. But after the 3 months are over, unfortunately, that non-Italian spouse has to leave the country because, like I said a moment ago, in most cases, that person is not allowed to continue residing in Italy for the duration of the other spouse's dual citizenship process, because the Italian government only gives the person who is applying for citizenship by descent the ability to stay throughout the citizenship process. Now, in some municipalities, including the municipality of Rovigo, where our office is located, the local government gives the ability for the non-Italian spouse to reside together with the Italian spouse who is in the process of applying for citizenship, but not immediately. That ability is given at a later stage in the process, in the dual citizenship process, which means that there is a period of time where the couple can stay together, the first 3 months. After the first 3 months, the couple cannot stay together, so the non-Italian spouse has to leave, and normally, evidently, the spouses, like, they both leave because they want to stay together. But then when they return, at some point, the local government gives the ability to the non-Italian spouse to continue residing in Italy throughout the dual citizenship process. And that's because the applicant for citizenship at some point, but not immediately, is given a residency permit that gives him the ability to stay in Italy throughout the citizenship process. More precisely, the applicant for citizenship is given a temporary permit at the very beginning of the process, which is what gives that person the ability to continue residing in Italy during the process past the 3 months. But then at some point in the process, that person is given a final residency permit, so no longer the temporary one, but like a more stable final residency permit, which is when the non-Italian spouse can apply for their own residency permit in connection to the residency permit given to the final residency permit given to the person who applied for citizenship.
So what you're saying is that in some places this is allowed, but not every place.
Yes, we at Italian Citizenship Assistance have spoken to our local questura to clarify the situation, because the thing is, this specific situation is subject to interpretation. So in Rovigo, we spoke to the local authorities and we came to a mutual understanding, and thankfully they are allowing the non-Italian spouse to, at least at some point in the process, to be able to reside in Italy, even before the person who applied for citizenship has received the citizenship. But in other places, I've talked to people who have applied DIY in other places, and they've told me that the local authorities never allowed the non-Italian spouse to apply for this residency permit during the dual citizenship process. So they had to wait for the person of Italian descent to actually become an Italian citizen. And only then the non-Italian spouse was able to apply for the residency permit for spouses of EU citizens, which is the residency permit that we talked about at the beginning of this video. So while it can be possible, it is not always guaranteed.
So in previous episodes, we've spoken about Jure Matrimoni, the process of getting citizenship through marriage. But today we focused only on just getting a residency permit to be able to stay with your Italian spouse. But what if you're entitled to citizenship, why would you maybe want to get a residency permit instead? What are maybe some of the differences between having residency and the ability to just remain in the country versus citizenship, which would put no limits on your stay in Italy?
Applying for citizenship through marriage, so based on the marriage to your Italian spouse, used to be a little bit easier in the past. More specifically, in 2018, the law changed and new requirements were introduced. So right now, to apply for citizenship through marriage, you actually have to take a language test, which can be an obstacle for many people, for many spouses of Italian citizens who don't speak Italian. So not only you have to wait a certain number of years from the marriage, you also have to speak Italian, and also the processing time was changed with the 2018 law that was passed by the Italian government, by the Ministry of Interior, Matteo Salvini of the time. So the processing time also changed from 2 years to a maximum of 4 years. So I guess the bottom line is that applying for citizenship through marriage is definitely possible, but there are some requirements. You have to wait a certain number of years from the marriage, you have to be able to speak Italian, and you have to take a language test, and you potentially could have to wait up to 4 years after you file the citizenship application. Whereas applying for this residency permit is a much, much easier process. So what I always say to my clients is it's not impossible to apply for citizenship through marriage, but at least you have the ability to take your spouse with you to the European Union in case you want to relocate to the European Union with your family. And you can do so as soon as you become an Italian citizen by descent. You don't have to wait any number of years from the marriage. Your spouse doesn't have to take a language test, and the process is very quick. So there is no multi-years processing time. This is something that you can get in just a couple of weeks, and you get, by the way, in Italy. So the process is as easy as just going to Italy and applying for the residency permit from within Italy.
So based on what you're saying, I'm just wondering, is there anything that could happen to a person by having the permesso di soggiorno? Would that impede their ability to apply for Italian citizenship, say if they did have the minimum amount of years necessary to be married, and if they had their language certificate? Would them having this permission of stay impede their ability to apply for citizenship? Or would this just be a way of entering Italy sooner to be able to allow them to be together in Italy first?
Exactly. It's what you just said. So you can simultaneously be in Italy on a residency permit and start the dual citizenship application process.
So one doesn't hinder the other.
Exactly. Of course, as we said at the beginning of the video, there are main differences, meaning that the citizenship through marriage is a more stable solution, whereas the residency permit, at least for the first 5 years, is connected to your spouse residing with you in the same country in the European Union, and to you being married to that person, meaning if you get divorced, if your spouse passes away, you lose your right to be able to continue residing in the European Union if that happens during the first 5 years. So applying for citizenship through marriage is definitely a more stable option, but make no mistake, when you apply for citizenship through marriage, during the up to 4 years processing time after you submit the application, if you get divorced or if your spouse passes away, you also lose the right to continue in the process. So you will not eventually get your Italian citizenship through marriage if you get divorced or if your spouse passes away during the processing time. And finally, the last piece of information that I wanted to add is that the residency permit that we talked about gives the non-Italian spouse the ability not only to reside in the European Union, but also to work in the European Union. So a question that I get a lot is there a difference if my spouse applies for citizenship rather than the residency permit in terms of the ability to work? And the answer is no. You can work if you are an Italian citizen through marriage, but also if you are a residency permit holder.
So I think we've actually covered yet again a lot of ground. So thank you again so much for taking the time to explain the process of moving to Italy legally, and in this case talking about the permissions of stay involved. And of course, if you are interested in more information about the Italian citizenship process, be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to leave those down in the comment section below. Or if you are seeking assistance with the processes that we've spoken about in this video or any other videos, feel free to contact Marco and his team at italiancitizenshipassistance.com/contact, where you can also go on their website and find a lot more information about the Italian citizenship process. And if you're interested in more information about life in Italy, living in Italy as a dual citizen and as an expat in Italy, I also make videos on my own channel here on YouTube, youtube.com/Rafael Di Furia. Anyway, thank you so much again for joining us, and we will see you all next time. Of course, this is Marco Permunian, and I'm Rafael Di Furia. See ya.
Ciao.